Hello Nidorinas and Nidorinos, I'm KingNido, and today it is the Laverre Constrictors going up against the Cinnabar Blazes, and let's have a look at this tail of the tape whilst these two sides are looking through their opening hands, because for the Cinnabar Blazes, they are contesting for the top of the leaderboard, but still no one is yet to secure a spot in Victory Road so far this season, which leaves the door wide open for the Laverre Constrictors to try and jump up into one of those top 5 spots. But with that said, let us know in the comments below who you think is going to win this matchup. Will it be the Psychic decks? Will it be the Fire decks? Let's go!
3, 2, 1, go!
And going first, having flipped heads, it is that Fire Spit Island deck of the Blazes as they move the Heatran into the active spot. The Constrictors, starting out with their red chain deck, do move the Azelf into the active spot with that Mesprit on the bench. We can see the Pokeball and the Dusknoir that they've got in hand. But again, the Blazers going first, they've got their own Pokeball and they are going to pull the Ninetales. They could potentially pull a Vulpix if they play this Pokeball, which is exactly what they're going to do. And they do, in fact, get the Vulpix. This could be a fantastic start for them in this game 1 of this best of 3 series as they move the Rocky Helmet onto the Heatran. With that Rage and Mad Strike, it does do 40 damage, but it does require 2 energy, and if it's already taken damage, it does an additional 40 as the Constrictors pull their Celestic Town Elder. They are going to move their own Rocky Helmet on to the Azelf, and they can play that Pokeball that they've got as well to get their own basic Pokemon in hand, which is going to be the Duskull. So now they're going to be hoping that they can pull the Dusclops shortly so they can eventually get that Dusknoir online. But in the meantime, they do get an energy onto the Azelf, and with those Psychic Arrows, they can target any Pokemon on the side of the Blazes, including that Vulpix, who is exactly who they're going to target because they do not want to have to contend with a beefed up Rage and Mad Strike. But it is going to be that Ninetales immediately coming online for the Cinnabar Blazes as the Heatran gets its first energy. And they do send it back over to the Constrictors, pulling their second Azelf, and that Celestic Town Elder can allow them to get a random basic Pokemon from their discard pile, although at the moment they've currently got no Pokemon that have been discarded. Neither team has taken a point yet, and as we always say, in this best of 3 series, regardless of the outcome of the first 2 matches, we still play that 3rd game because it still counts toward our leaderboard. As Ninetales continues to take damage from the Azelf, the Magma has been pulled for the Cinnabar Blazes. They are going to put that onto the bench. They've got that Pokemon Communication in hand, plus the Cyrus as well, but here begins the Rage and Mad Strike. Only 40 damage though, because Heatran has not taken any damage. We say that as it takes damage from the Rocky Helmet that is on place, being used as the Pokemon tool for Azelf, and we see a second Dusknoir being pulled for the Constrictors as they're going to get a first energy on to the Duskull, and the Azelf, thinking about who it wants to target here, is going to go for the Magma this time. But the Blazers now pulling their Dawn. This can allow them to move an energy from one of their benched Pokemon to their active Pokemon. They get a first of 2 required energy onto the Ninetales as they play their Pokemon Communication. They're going to send the Vulpix back into the back into their deck, as they get a Magma out in return. It does provide them with an alternative Pokemon from their deck, but this Rage and Mad Strike now doing 80 damage thanks to the damage that Heatran has taken courtesy of the Rocky Helmet that was on that Azelf. And the Cinnabar Blazes with this Fire Spit Island are taking the first point here in game 1. The Mesprit being moved into the active spot for the Constrictors. The Pokemon Center Lady has been pulled. They're clearly trying to get that Dusknoir online because we know that Mesprit cannot outlast a hit from Heatran here. And they're thinking about how they want to approach this. They were looking at that Azelf they've got in hand, but they just get a 3rd energy onto the Duskull, and they do end their turn as there is the Vulpix already back in hand for the Cinnabar Blazers. And the Blazers thinking about how they want to approach this, hovering that fire energy between the Magma and the Ninetales, but they do opt to go with the Ninetales, and here is another Rage and Mad Strike to wipe this Mesprit off the board. And the Blazers are looking to lock game 1 up here very quickly. The Duskull being moved into the active spot. They need to pull the Dusclops, and they pull the Uxie. This is terrible for the Constrictors. They have not gotten any of the cards they've needed so far here in game 1. They are going to go for the Will-O-Wisp. They're not even worried about the energy. They know exactly what's going to happen. They're just getting a little bit of energy damage onto the Heatran, but it is offset by that Rocky Helmet, and this allows the Blazers, they are going to pull their second Ninetales And you may wonder, are they going to go straight on the offensive? No, they won't, because they can maximize the damage they can go for with the Ninetales, because again, this counts toward the leaderboard, and that flamethrower wipes the Duskull off the board, and this Fire Spit Island has absolutely run through the red chain deck of the Laverre Constrictors. And if you're enjoying what you're seeing, please leave a like, leave a comment, share, subscribe. All those things help out this channel as we look to make this series grow. And as we have our table reset, the Blazers, using their Flamathon deck, have flipped heads. They're going first. They move the Houndour into the active spot. The Constrictors going with their Distortion World deck. They've got the full Ghastly line in hand, but they've also got that Rotom. And they do opt to go with the Ghastly in the active spot, the Rotom going onto the bench. The Haunter the Haunter and the Gengar only require 2 energy, and the Blazers are going to pull the potion. They've got their Pokeball here. They may want a Ponyta because we can see those 2 Rapidash in hand. They've also got the Iono, and it is a Ponyta that they're able to get out of their deck. And if you're wondering why there are cards from sets in A1 series, that is because the Blazers did not have enough fire types they could choose from the Space-Time Smackdown, Triumphant Light, and Shining Revelry sets. The Constrictors pulled their Pokeball. They're going to play that to get the second Rotom in hand. And the Ghastly, getting its first energy, can go for the Astonish. Now, it doesn't actually do damage, it's a coin flip, and it can reveal a random card from the Blazers' hand, which they would have to shuffle into their deck, but unfortunately they flip the tails as the Houndoom is pulled for the Cinnabar Blazes. Now, it does require 2 energy, so they may not want to evolve the Houndour yet. Instead, they're going for the Flare onto the Ghastly, and it's fitting that it does know that move, because their representative in the PokeType League VGC series on our other channel are the Laverre Flare. As we go with the cross promotion, the Laverre Constrictors have pulled their Giratina, but the Haunter is now online, and they do not know that the Houndoom is in hand for the Blazers. They go with the Mumble, 40 damage onto the Houndour, but the Haunter cannot outlast a hit from the Houndoom. The Blazers pull their Paldean Tauros. It is the Blaze Breed. And there it is, the Houndoom with that corner can do 60 damage. They immediately get an energy onto it. They're not, well, they are thinking of evolving the Ponyta. They get the Tauros online, but which which Rapidash they want to choose, they're deciding to wait, and there it is, that corner wiping the Haunter off the board. This is a great start for the Blazers. Once again, that is not what the Constrictors needed though. And unfortunately, their only choice to move into the active spot is the Rotom. They've pulled their Clefable, and they are going to now get that Giratina onto the bench. They may want to move that Rotom onto the bench as well, if they're concerned of what just happened. They get a first energy onto the Giratina, which means they're willing to let that Rotom take the damage and potentially the fall, because that corner does prevent the opposing Pokemon from retreating. And the Blazers pull their X-Speed, which would actually allow them to retreat for 1 energy less than usual. And that corner continues from the Blazers onto Rotom, as Ponyta just received its first energy. The second Giratina now being pulled for the Laverre Constrictors. The Blazers in full control at the moment. They're looking to lock up this series in game 2. They're aiming for a clean sweep over the Constrictors. The second Ponyta being pulled for the Blazers immediately moved onto the bench. They can start going with these evolutions, and that is exactly what they do. They do get that Rising Lunge Rapidash, who requires 2 energy, onto the bench. They play the potion to restore 20 health for the Houndoom, and they get a first energy onto the Tauros. And once again, with this corner, they're going to take the Rotom off the board. That is 2 points for the Cinnabar Blazes. The Constrictors are still yet to take a point, not just in this game, but in this series. The Giratina does require 1 more energy. It can do 70 damage to the Houndoom, As they've pulled their Giant Cape, they're going to boost the health of Giratina by 20, up to 140. It will only do 70 damage with this Spooky Shot, which will keep Houndoom on the board though. Houndoom with 10 health remaining. The Blazers do pull their Professor's Research, who they are going to play immediately. Keeping in mind, they still have that Iono in hand. They get the second Houndoom. They get another potion. And they get that Rapidash, the second Rapidash online, as they get a second energy onto the Tauros. And so all their bench Pokemon only require 1 more energy to go on the offensive. They're making sure that that Giratina has to stay in the active spot with 80 health remaining. They have just pulled the Team Rocket Grunt But that is not very useful for them right now because that Houndoom is such an easy target for this Giratina. They just need to think about how they want to approach this, and they are limited on their choices. They do get a first energy onto the benched Giratina. There is no retreating though. And there it is, the spooky shot to wipe the Houndoom off the board. But regardless, the Cinnabar Blazes can move whoever they want. If they move that Paldean Taurus, it is guaranteed to do 80 damage, and that is exactly what they're going to do. The Blazes pull the Pokemon Center Lady. That's not their concern. They get the one required energy onto the Taurus, and with this Blaze tackle, the Cinnabar Blazes will lock up this series in full domination over the Constrictors and this Distortion world. But things are not over as we have our final table reset. The Cinnabar Blazes trying to take the clean sweep, the Laverre Constrictors trying to regain some points and damage to count towards our leaderboard, and they've flipped heads for the first time as well, and they're going with the Celestic Dream deck, their third and final deck. That is the Togepi going into the active spot. They've got the Cresselia in hand as well. It is the Blazes with their Flint Lockwood deck moving the Slugma into the active spot. It is the Heat Rotom on the bench, and at the last moment the Constrictors have decided to move their Cresselia onto the bench, but here we go, our game 3. The Constrictors pulling their second Togetic as well. They've got the Cynthia in hand. They want to get the Togekiss in hand because that Cynthia does add an additional 50 damage. They play the Pokeball to get a basic Pokemon. It is going to be the Drifloon that they get in hand. And without much else they can do, they keep the Drifloon in hand and send it over to the Cinnabar Blazes. They pull their XP. Now they've got a Professor's Research, so they're going to get another 2 cards out of their deck. They get the Sizzlipede, they get the Pokeball, so they can now get a basic Pokemon as well with that. And it is going to be the second Slugma that they get in hand. Unfortunately, the Slugma only requires 1 energy to go for that Flare. And as we mentioned earlier, the Flare in the PokeType League VGC. This is the PokeType League TCG though. As they put the Rocky Helmet onto the Slugma, and it goes with the Flare to do 20 damage to that Togepi, bringing it down to 30 health. And the Constrictors pull their second Togepi as well, so they immediately get that onto the bench. They get the Togetic onto the active Togepi, who only requires 1 energy for that Fairy Wind to do 40 damage, but it will take 20 recall damage from the Rocky Helmet. They have to keep that in mind here. And there it is, the Fairy Wind onto the Slugma, bringing it down to only 30 health, but there's the Rocky Helmet doing 20 damage to the Togetic, bringing it down to 40. And the Blazers have pulled the Magcargo as well with that Searing Flame. It does 30 damage, but it leaves the opposing Pokemon burned as they get the second required energy onto it. And the burn will do an additional 20 damage to Togetic, wiping it off the board as the Cinnabar Blazers take the first point here in Game 3. They're not worried about the coin flip though, because Togetic is wiped into the discard pile. The Blazers looking for that clean sweep. They are in control at the moment. The Constrictors are going to move the Drifloon into the active spot. They pull the Togekiss though. Now Drifloon will only be able to outlast Magcargo for 1 turn. We just saw what that Searing Flame does. They get the 1 required energy though onto the Togetic. And it is the Center Scorch being pulled for the Cinnabar Blazers here, so they do get an energy onto the Sizzlipede as they hope to set it up. That Center Scorch does require 4 energy, and here is another Searing Flame, 30 damage onto the Drifloon, and the burn for that additional 20 damage. It will wipe Drifloon off the board, even though it is now cured of that burn. It is not cured of being put into the discard pile. And the Blazers have taken 2 points already. They're in full control, but the Togetic is moved into the active spot. They can get the Togekiss online, and they've just pulled the Giant Cape as well. They can empty their hand here. The Togekiss with that Overdrive Smash does 60 damage. The Giant Cape takes its health up to 160, but with the Cynthia, they can ensure that they wipe the Magcargo off the board because it will do 110. And then with that Overdrive Smash, when it occurs on consecutive turns, it does an additional 60 damage, which means it is guaranteed to do 120 damage for every turn that it does in a row. They do take that 20 recoil damage from the Rocky Helmet, but the Constrictors are looking to bring this back with the Togekiss in the active spot. The Blazers need to think about how they want to approach this. And they are going to opt for that Heat Rotom to go into the active spot. You have to think that's potentially going to be a sacrifice. They have just pulled the Team Rocket Grunt as well. They can try to get the energies off of the Togekiss to cut off the Overdrive Smash. and they get a Tails immediately. This will prevent them from getting any energy off of the Togekiss. The Center Scorch though is now online. It has 130 health. It can outlast an Overdrive Smash from that Togekiss as they send it back over to the Constrictors, who pull their second Drifloon here. They need to get 2 more points. And that Overdrive Smash here is going to wipe the Heat Rotom off the board, and now they only need 1 more point. The next point will lock up game 3 as the Constrictors are trying to get at least 1 on the board here. Center Scorch moved into the active spot. It takes 2 more turns though, because it's only got 2 energy on it at the moment. It still needs another 2. There's the third one for this Fire Blast that does 130 damage. And the Constrictors have just pulled their second Togekiss, but they don't have that Togetic anymore. Cresselia getting its second required energy. The Overdrive Smash, 120 damage once again, bringing Center Scorch down to only 10 health. 130 damage is not enough to take the Togekiss off the board. They do pull the Giant Cape. They get a 4th energy on to the Center Scorch here. But they know exactly what's going to happen. They go for the Fire Blast. They're maximizing their damage here. 130 damage onto the Togekiss. The Drifloon is pulled for the Constrictors, but they're not worried about that. They're just worried about making sure they win one of the games in this series, and they do wipe that Center Scorch off the board, bringing it back by taking 3 consecutive points with the Togekiss. However, with that said, the Blazers have moved up into second place as they are going up against last season's reigning champions, the Mellow Rumbles, whereas for the Constrictors, they will be going up against the Rogues. But until then, Nidorinos, thank you so much for watching. Let us know in the comments below what you thought the best card was, and if you enjoyed what you saw, please leave a like, share, subscribe, but more importantly, always remember, send thanks, and I'll see you when you see me.